All right, here we go. So this is the chapter that starts on constructions. Almost the entire chapter is on constructions. So every day in class and for homework, you're going to be drawing things. Here's your homework. All right, here we go. So a nice, easy class. We get roughly 3 constructions a day. Today is about that. You're not going to be challenged on any one of these. Just so you know, the constructions themselves, some of them you'll memorize immediately after seeing them one time. Others of them you will not have these memorized at all. They all have instructions to them. I'll show you the instructions. You're going to need to pause the video to write down the instructions into your book of truth. And then you absolutely positively have your book of truth when we take the test. All right. I enjoy this chapter. It's just drawing. There's only 2 tools used in constructions. I've talked about this before. The first one is a straight edge. A straight edge is, well, it kind of looks like a ruler, but it could be anything that allows you to draw a segment, line, ray. It has to be straight, though. I don't need any markings on it, but you can certainly use a ruler if you choose to. I usually, you're going to see me today, I use a protractor for my straight edge. The second main tool is called the compass. We've talked about this before. It's got 3 parts to it. It's got a literal physical point. Be careful with that. You can absolutely injure yourself with that. It has a drawing side to it. That's the pencil point right there. Usually the lead is very thick, but it can get broken. So just make sure, especially before the test, you got everything ready to go. And lastly, the middle section, which opens and closes the legs. Sometimes this is a friction adapter. The one you're going to see me has a little wheel on it. The one with the wheel is the better of the 2. All right, so we'll write down a couple of quick definitions. So what is the formal definition of a straight edge? It's a tool that allows you to draw lines and segments. Obviously rays as well too. So that's a straight edge. And then the second, there's no marking, or a couple of ideas about the straight edge. There's no markings or measurements on a straight edge, although you certainly can use a ruler. And then the second tool is the compass itself. And yes, you can certainly draw circles with it and arcs, and we will be doing, most of the time we're drawing something, we'll be drawing arcs. A few times we'll be drawing circles, but what the tool is really used to do is to measure distances. In a construction, we're going to measure a distance and we're going to mark that on our paper using an arc. It'll make more sense when we do a couple of these. Lastly, what we're doing this entire chapter are called constructions, and those are methods of drawing or reproducing geometric shapes. So if you remember in most of the proofs we do, from chapter 3 onward, there's always one line of hey, we got to make a triangle, so we draw a line, and then the reason we say we can do that allows us to do that is something we say construct, literally the word construction. Some books do constructions throughout the entire book. Like as soon as you need to draw a line, they show you how to do that construction. As soon as you need to bisect an angle, they show you how to do that construction. Our book chooses to hold all that into the very end of the book, towards the end of the book, and do it all in one chapter. All right, so using these 2 things, we're going to do a couple constructions today. And we're literally going to be making angles, shapes, and one of the more remarkable things is we're going to be taking a square root. For instance, the square root of 4.5 using just our straight edge and our compass, kind of a remarkable thing. So your job is to learn these constructions. You got to be able to do these constructions. They're not tricks. I will be explaining how they work and why they work. And if you can follow instructions, this is a pretty easy chapter. There are only a few of these are confusing. None of the ones today will be confusing. Only a few will be confusing, and we'll make sure we slow down when we do those. The constructions themselves are going to be numbered just like, theorems, theorem 9.1. We're going to have construction 1, 2, 3, 4. If there's a minor construction, it might be construction 1A, 1B, that sort of thing. So I'll refer to these as construction numbers. They are also going to have names, so either refer to them by the number or their names. And then each day, as I already stated, I'm going to give you the instructions for doing this. Well, if you were physically in class, I would be giving you these in a handout, but you'll see the instruction there. Make sure they wind up in your book of truth. All right, so let's do one. The first one is a very simple one. I don't know too many people actually write down the instructions for this one because it makes sense. So I'm going to show you this picture right here. And then what's going to happen is that I'm going to transition to a document camera when I actually do the steps. So I'm setting it up right now. So what I'm going to do, since this is done online, I'm going to not do the construction first. I'm going to go over the instructions, and then I want you to pause the video, write down the instructions, and then I'll turn on the document camera, and then we'll do one together. Okay, so here are the instructions, and I'm going to do these really quick. I'll just talk through them real quick. I'm not going to go into the explanation of them. And you're going to pause the video, write down these steps. Step number 1, you draw a new segment that's slightly larger than the given second segment. Step number 2, you're going to use the compass and measure the first segment. Step number 3, from one of the endpoints of the new segment, you're going to mark that measurement from your compass on onto the new segment. And then step number 4, you're going to label. All right, so those are the instructions. I'm going to now switch, if I can do this. I think I can do this. Document camera, where are you? There we go. Okay, got it. All right, you should be able to see the... Why is this not focusing? Focus. That's a pretty crummy focus. That's better. Okay, so there's my new segment. I'm going to copy that segment and I'm going to make CD. So let's see, step number 1, straight edge. So my straight edge is going to be this portion of the protractor right here. So it doesn't matter where I draw this. I just need to make a new segment that's slightly larger. This is step number 1, slightly larger than the original segment. Okay. If you'd like, you can mark one of the, because remember we're making new segment CD, you can mark that part C. That's not part of the steps, but you'll see why. Okay, now I'm going to take my compass and I'm going to measure from A to B. Now, notice I have 2 dots there on A and B, so I'm going to go from the left of the left dot to the right of the right dot, if that makes sense. So I'm going to put the pointy part on the left of dot A. I'm going to close my compass until you notice I'm making a little arc right there, and so this now represents that distance. Next step, I'm going to trace that distance onto my new segment, and where that met the other segment, that is my new point D, and I have now constructed the new segment CD that is congruent. This is the labeling part. That is congruent to the original segment. Okay, and there you go. That is construction number 1. All right, back to our presentation. Okay, so this is the one, like I said, some people don't even write these instructions down because they're really, really obvious for this one. But when in doubt, write this out. This is called the congruent segments. So this is construction 1A. Let's do another easy one. I left off step 5. I did that on my actual document camera there. So step number 5 is to write the congruency statement, which I did. Okay. Remember, your goal here is to learn the steps. So if you want to play the video twice or 3 times, and probably not on this particular construction, but once you do it about 3 times, this locks in pretty well. The test will actually, what are the test questions going to look like when we get to test day? It's literally just going to be doing the constructions. So I'll just give you a segment and I'll say make a new congruent segment. All right. So what is the work, right? How do I know that you're actually doing this? Well, I'm going to see the arcs that you make. Obviously, on this first construction, there's only 1 arc. There's not much work. But as we get to more complicated ones, there's far more complicated constructions. Okay. So let's see what this one says. So this one is to construct a congruent circle. This one should be pretty obvious what you're supposed to do right here. So let's see, what do the instructions say? So step number 1 says draw a new point anywhere on your paper. Step number 2, measure the given radius. So I would measure AB there, kind of like the previous construction. That's why this is called construction 1B. And now I have the radius that I can apply anywhere to a new circle. So from the new point, draw the circle with the compass because you just measured it from the original circle. Step number 4 is label. And then step number 5, write your congruency statement. All right, so we're going to construct new circle C. All right, okay, pause the video, write this down. I'm going to go to the document camera right here. So there is my original circle. So step number 1, it doesn't matter where, I'm going to draw it off here to the, maybe right here, put a new circle. So this is C. So we're going to make new circle C. Okay, step number 2, I have to measure the given radius or the radius of the given circle. So we just try to be nice and accurate. I'm going to go from the left dot, the left side of the left of the center, so point A, and then I'm going to open up my circle. And I'm going to make sure, I'm going to even draw a little arc right here just to make sure I in fact measured that distance. And I did. So there's that distance right here. And as you can imagine, we simply put it in the same spot and simply draw the circle. Now, it is kind of a skill to draw these things in a sense of where do you physically put the pressure as you're holding this. And so the goal here is not to put a whole lot of force on the point itself. You put a little bit of you can't see my whole hand when I'm doing this, but I'm actually holding it from right here. And so I'm putting the force of the force of the compass onto the point, but I'm not pushing super hard. And then I'm just lightly tracing this around like this. And someone's trying to call me. Okay. So there we go. Let's see. We're supposed to label. We did C and then write a congruency statement. So let's see. Circle C is congruent to circle, what was it, A? Yeah, circle A. And there's my congruency statement. Oh, you didn't see anything I just wrote there. So there's my congruency statement right there. All right. All right. So those are our first 2 constructions, pretty straightforward. The next construction, okay, I'm not sure if challenging is the word I would use to describe this, but they're certainly far more challenging than the 2 we just did. All right, so remember, we're going to copy all the instruction in our book of truth. You need to make sure you understand the steps that I'm doing, and a little bit of practice goes a long way. All right, so this is going to look like a trick. Well, that actually is a trick. It's going to look like a trick, but I will explain why it works. I usually don't explain the first 2 constructions, like why it works, because it's just like a postulate. It's very obvious why it works. But this one needs a little bit of explanation. Okay, so our goal here is to make, they will give you an angle, and your goal here is to copy that angle precisely, its measurement. So in other words, you're making a congruent angle. So let's see, we got angle BAC or CAB, and we're supposed to copy that angle. And it doesn't really matter what we call it, but it wants us to call it EDF. All right, so what are the steps? Step number 1, we're going to draw a new ray as large as any of the rays of the first angle. I'll give you a better explanation of that when I show you it. Step number 2, using the compass, you're going to draw an arc onto the given angle from its vertex through its 2 sides. Now, it's not going to have 2 sides at that point, but, well, you're going to see that when we actually do that. Step number 3, you mark that distance onto the new ray, and that's the one that's not going to have the 2 new legs. It's only going to have 1 leg at that point. And then you're going to go back to the original angle, and so on the given angle, using your compass, you're going to measure the distance from the intersection of the arc and the 2 sides. That makes no sense right now, but it will when we do it. Step number 5, we mark that distance onto the new ray, and then we mark the new intersection and the connection point of the endpoint of the ray to the intersection point And then finally label and write a congruency statement. I left off the write a congruency statement. Okay, that's a bunch of gobbledygook right there. You're going to need to see this one. I'll just say this one. This one is not very complicated. Certainly the instructions seem very complicated, but let's do one and then see if you agree or disagree that this is complicated. All right, so there is the angle that I'm given, and I need to copy that, and I already forgot what I'm going to call it. So I think it was DEF or EDF, something like that. All right, so step number one, you're going to make a ray. So I'm going to make the new angle below it. You're going to make a new ray that is slightly larger than the, let's say, AC. So I'm going to call this, I think it was called EDF or DEF. So E would be in the middle point. So that's going to be my middle point right there. And I don't know, it doesn't really matter where you put D. So we'll call that D. Okay. All right. So there's my first ray. I just made it slightly larger than the previous one. Labeling anything at this point, it's not a requirement, but I did it anyway. Okay, so step number two is the one that's a little bit hard to understand. So here's what I'm going to do. So notice I'm going to look at ray AC right there, and I'm going to open up my compass to any distance as long as it's not larger than AC. And I'll just say this, if you want your angle to be accurate, then if you draw it towards the end of C, it's better than it is towards closer. It'll be a bit more accurate. Once I have that distance, and really it's a random distance, once I have that distance, I'm going to put the point on the middle of point A, and then I'm going to draw an arc that goes through the two rays of the angle. You see what I did there? And then lastly, I'm not going to change this distance. Okay. All right. So once again, the steps are, I'm going to open it up to any distance. It's just got to be bigger than or less than AC. And the further down you're at, the more accurate. If you do it really, really tiny, it's not as accurate. And then I'm going to draw an arc that goes through both legs of the angle. And then I'm not going to change this distance. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer that distance, that arc, onto point E and through an imaginary second ray. So where would the imaginary second ray? Well, that imaginary second ray is going to be about right here. So I don't want to draw the arc really tiny because I want this arc that I just drew to go through the eventual second part of the angle. So hopefully that made sense. All right, now here comes it's not the tricky part, but it's the part you might forget. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the distance. I'm going to touch this with a point, or I'll do it with a pencil. I'm going to measure this distance from here to here. I'm measuring the distance from here to here. From here to here. With my compass, I'm going to measure that distance. So I'm going to have to close my compass this time. I'll close my compass until I actually get that distance. Putting the pressure on the point, and then close the distance down. Hopefully you can see this. And then I'm going to draw a little tiny arc just to confirm that I do in fact have that distance. And I do. Okay, it's not necessary to draw that arc, but I just want to make sure it's there. Okay. Now, without changing that distance, I'm going to transfer that distance to pencil to this point right here. And so I'm going to wind up with an arc over here somewhere. So I'm going to put the point right here. And then I'm going to draw this arc right there. Doesn't matter how big to make the arc. So now I've transferred the distance from here to here to here to here. And now, without further explanation, you can probably see why this works. Now I have an intersection point. This is the next step. Here is the intersection of the original arc and the new arc. That's a point. I'll put a little dot right there, right smack dab in the center. And then basically the last step is I'm going to connect point E through that point right there. So from here through that point. And if I've done it correctly, I have made congruent angles. I got a label, DE, this is called F. So now let's see, congruency statement. So let's see, angle BAC is now in fact congruent to angle DEF. Or let's label the same way, FED. And there we go. All right, once again, I'll just go over the steps real quick with my pencil right here. Step number one, you draw a side that is a little bit longer than AC. I mean, that's the idea. If it was a little bit shorter, the reason why we want it a little bit longer is just in case your arc is not long enough. Step number two, we make an arc on the original angle. Once again, if you can certainly make it down here, but then it becomes really challenging of measuring those small distance. So the farther out here, the more accurate it becomes. Make this new arc, don't change the distance and transfer it down here. Next step, we're going to measure the distance between here and here with our compass. Transfer it from here to here. That's this arc that appears right here. Put a dot for that intersection and then connect E through that point right there and you're done. And since you have, if you're using a protractor right here, you could actually measure the angle right here. This, I didn't draw the lines long enough to measure, but we can see this appears to be about 22 degrees. And if we measure this one right here, and well, I didn't draw the line long enough, it's 22 degrees as well too. Okay, so there's the first, I don't know if I want to say the word challenging, but certainly the first construction that requires multiple steps. All right, that's construction 2. All right, now here comes a far more interesting one. Has a lot of steps once again, but what I'm going to basically do is I'm going to take a given angle and I'm going to cut it in half. In other words, I'm going to bisect it. All right, so let's look at the steps here. So step number one, oh boy, there are going to be a lot of arcs. Okay, so I'm going to refer to my arcs as arc names, like arc sub 1, arc sub 2, or arc sub 3. So when you read these, if you thought the last one was confusing before you actually did the construction, this one's pretty confusing. All right, so it says draw your first arc from the vertex through the two sides. Step number 2, from the intersection point, draw another arc, call that arc 2, of a suitable radius. Now, we're not talking about radius of a circle. Or when they say the word radius, they're talking about distance. Now, what the heck is a suitable radius? Well, we'll talk about it when we do it. Step number 3, from the other intersection point of arc 1, draw another arc, so a third arc of the same radius. So you haven't changed the distance, intersecting the other arc. In other words, arc 2. Very confusing until we do it. Step number 4, draw a ray from the vertex of the given angle through the intersection of arc 2 and arc 3. Step number 5 is label. So go ahead and pause, write that down, and then let's do the construction. Okay, so here we go. Step number 1, we're going to make an arc. Once again, it's kind of like the previous one. I want my arc to be, I don't know, we certainly don't want the arc to be here, although it could be. It's easier if the arc is way down here. So I'm going to open up my compass to a distance that I can go through both of the legs of the angle towards the end. So the point's on the center of A, and I'm going to draw an arc so it looks like that. Okay? Now for me, the next step says open up your compass to a suitable radius. So what's a suitable radius? Well, it's literally any distance as long as when we make these two arcs, they intersect. So for me, as long as I have the space, I usually never even change this distance. I just use this distance that I just made. But we certainly, just to show you I can, I'll make it a little bit smaller just to show you it works. Now, if you make it too small, this won't work. So it needs to be of a suitable radius. I'll explain further on that when actually I do the next step. Okay, so what the next step talks about, it talks about this intersection point right here. And then the next step talks about this intersection point. So we're talking about this intersection and this intersection, both of these intersections. So with a suitable distance, I'm going to draw an arc. Now, I know where the angle bisector is going to wind up basically. It's going to wind up somewhere right here. So I want my intersection points of the two arcs I'm about to draw to be somewhere around here. So when I draw this arc, I'm going to go to this intersection point right here. When I draw this arc, I'm not going to draw it up here because that's not where the angle bisector, it's going to be sort of in the middle. So I'm going to draw another arc somewhere like that. And then without changing the distance is the next step. I'm going to go to my second intersection point, the point right here. It's important that you haven't changed your distance, and I'm going to intersect those two arcs right there. Okay, so why can't this distance, no, I'm going to change the distance. Why can't it be too small? If you make it too small, then they would never intersect. You'd have an arc here and an arc here, and they wouldn't intersect. We want them to intersect, but it literally could be any distance. I'll do a different distance as long as I have the space. Okay, this one's much larger. I'll do the same process. Draw an arc here, draw an arc here, and notice they intersect. So the actual distance, and that's why it says suitable, not a specific distance, can be any distance. In fact, you could even have the intersection, instead of being outside, you could have the intersection point. Let's see if I can do this. You could have the intersection point on the inside if you wanted to. As long as they intersect. Okay. All right, now the next step's kind of, hopefully you already figured this one out. We're going to go from point A through the intersection points that, well, we made a bunch of them. But notice they all line up. My straight edge isn't long enough to go through all three of them. But notice if I go through that one, I go through, let me extend the line. And notice I go through all three of those right here. And so now I have a new point right here. And let's see, A, B, C, we'll call that point D. And now I have two congruent arcs. That means that this arc right here, or this angle is now congruent to this angle right here. It's an angle bisector. Now, this is the first one I'm actually going to give you a, I don't know if I'd call this necessarily a proof, but it's why this works. We had this theorem a long time ago when we did angle bisectors that said if you live on the angle bisector, you are equidistant to the sides of the angle itself. And so what are you doing when you're measuring with a compass? You're measuring a fixed distance. So when I measure this distance right here, right, then you have to be the same distance here as you are on this side right here, and that's what we're actually measuring. I don't know if the camera caught that, but that's the idea right there. All right, so there is your next construction. Angle bisector. If there's one that you need to do a few times, it's probably this one right here. Okay. So what's homework going to look like? Homework is going to ask you to do a couple different things. I'm going to give you another one other than this one right here. I'm going to go to the document camera right here. And so homework might look something like this. Sheet of paper. They may give you a distance. We'll call this AB. And they may say construct CD, so segment C, such that, let's see, CD is equal to 3 ABs. Okay. So what are they asking you to do? They're trying to have you make a new segment CD. So let's see, new segment CD, such that CD is 3 of ABs. Well, how would you do this? This would be construction 1. We would measure AB. There's measure AB, and then we simply do it once. Oh, I sure hope I made this long enough. Twice. Did I do it? Yes, sir. There we go. So if this is point C, then this would be point D. And now CD is 3 ABs. So that's what the homework will look like. A couple more. Here's the one that I had on the class itself. It says, using your straight edge, draw 2 separate angles. Construct a third angle who is the sum of the 2 given angles. Gosh, that sounds complicated, but watch this. So they're going to give you an angle, or give you 2 angles. So angle this one. I'm just making 2 quick angles right there. And let's make a really big one. It's still going to be acute, but certainly not the same distance. So what they want to do, so we'll call this angle A, and we'll call this angle B. And they want you to make angle C, make a new angle C such that the measure of angle C is equal to the measure of angle A plus the measure of angle B. So in other words, make an angle that's those two angles added together. So how would you do this? Okay, step number one, copy this, and it doesn't matter which one. Step number one, copy that angle. I'm going to freehand this just to give you the idea. So we're going to copy angle B using that technique that we just used for copying angles. And then what they want you to do is they want you to add this angle right here. So using this side right here as this side right here, onto that, construct angle A. And now this whole thing from here all the way to right there would be the combination of the two angles. All right. So there's an explanation of what homework will look like. And I think I have one more. No, I just did the previous one. So I mean, this is kind of what they're asking for. And by the way, there on the bottom right there is what they're really looking for to how you actually how do you check to see if the student is actually doing it correctly. Okay. And notice here on number 6 right here on the bottom, that's the one I just did for you right there. So you draw the first angle and then using that common side right here, attach the second angle right there. All right, so there's your first class into constructions. I hope you liked it. I find construction is kind of fun. Just take good care of your equipment because, make sure that if you have little wheels or something like that, they're not super tight, but not loose either. Things can loosen up on them. And that'll do it for today. And I'll see you next class.